Hey everyone, and welcome to part 2 of our How to Build a Computer series. If you missed part 1, you should check it out. That will teach you how to build both of these systems right here, or a system of your own design using parts that you have chosen out to specifically meet your needs. Today's video is going to be about installing an operating system, installing drivers to make the hardware work and play nice with the operating system that you install, and also some final finishing touches to get everything set up the way you want it so you can actually start using your new system. Now, let's start off with the basic question of what is an operating system. Essentially, an operating system is a software environment that allows you to use the computer, install other programs, and get as much out of your computer as you can. And pretty much, if you have a computer, you need an operating system, and that goes all the way down to, say, a cell phone. The operating system for your cell phone might be Android, for example, or it might be iOS, for example. But what we're going to be installing today is Windows 8.1. The reason we've chosen Windows 8.1 is that a lot of you folks out there are PC gamers, and Windows 8.1 is the best current platform for playing PC games. Also, Windows 8.1 is the most widely used, so chances are you might be leaning towards that. However, we would be remiss if we didn't mention that there are other operating systems out there. Specifically, we can bring up Linux, which is it's huge, especially in the server market. There's tons of different versions of Linux, and you can often get those for free to install and start playing around with the hardware. It's a little bit more technical to use Linux, but it is also what other operating systems are based on. So Steam OS, for example, is based on Linux, as well as Chrome OS. So if you're going to dabble in those, go ahead and have at it, but this video is mostly going to cover Windows 8.1. We'll move from there into driver installation, and drivers are basically other bits of software that help the hardware play nice with the software and make sure everything is running optimally. And of course, we're going to finish with some details about getting the finishing touches put on the system, getting everything set up to look how you want it to look, setting up additional drives. But when it comes to installing an operating system, there's the established way that's been around for quite some time, which is to install off of the optical media, such as a DVD that came with your Windows 8.1 copy, depending on what version you brought. However, Windows 8.1 also has copies now that don't come with media. So for that, you would need to download the image of the disk. You would need to then load it onto, say, a USB, or possibly burn it onto a disk yourself, and then go ahead with the installation. We're going to be showing you both ways today, so check out both and go with whichever one suits your needs. I tend to lean towards the USB installation these days, but all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Our first Windows 8.1 installation demo is going to be with our Intel-based system right behind us, and we're going to be installing off of the optical media. Now, this system already has a DVD drive installed that will allow us to read this optical media. If you're working with a system that doesn't have that, you could possibly look into an external optical drive that can read DVDs and CDs. We are going to be installing straight from this disk, although not this disk directly. This is a Windows 8 Pro. We're going to be installing Windows 8.1. But this disk looks pretty. So if you got the media straight from Microsoft, you'll need that. You will also need, of course, your Windows 8.1 installation key, which is located inside here. You're going to need your peripherals, of course, so monitor, keyboard, and mouse, which I've plugged in via USB and DVI in the back of the system. The system, of course, everything plugged in with power. And lastly, the internet, as represented by this red Ethernet cable. If you don't have the internet, I don't know how you're watching this video. Now, before I do a Windows installation, I like to unplug any drives that I'm not actually installing Windows to. Since I'm installing Windows onto the crucial SSD that we have, I'm going to unplug the two WD black mechanical drives. This is a carryover from my Windows 7 installations in the past, but it'll also make sure that, in particular, if I have anything already stored on those extra drives, there's no chance that I might accidentally format them by installing onto the wrong drive. Of course, leave the crucial drive still plugged in, and then go ahead and pop in your Windows 8.1 installation media into your optical drive bay. I'm then going to power on the system, and I will tap the delete button immediately. This will get you into the UEFI or BIOS with just about any modern motherboard. It's almost always the delete key that you push to access that right as the system's booting up. This is an ASRock motherboard, so this is the UEFI. It's also often still referred to as the BIOS or Basic Input-Output System, although technically it's now the UEFI. Either way, this is your basic system settings. This is not an operating system yet, but there's a couple things that we need to do here. I'm going to jump over to the Advanced tab first and go to the Storage Configuration. You should be able to find this under Storage Configuration in just about any motherboard you're using. Here, I want to go to the SATA mode. There's 3 possible modes. IDE is a legacy mode, and we want to make sure it's not set to IDE. You're going to want AHCI if you're going for a standard basic installation, but since this system does have those 2 WD black drives, I'm going to set it to RAID because I will eventually go ahead and set those up in a RAID configuration. Apart from that, we want to make sure that we're going to boot from the proper place. So I'll go ahead and go over here to the boot section. And here we can see a few different options. Right now it's going to try to boot off of that crucial SSD, and since there's nothing on that SSD right now, it would just give us that there's nothing to boot from error. So we actually want to change this boot option from the crucial SSD to our mechanical drive, and this is just listed as a ATAPI. This is the model number of the drive there. So we'll go ahead and select that. There's other ways to do this too. If your motherboard actually supports a quick boot menu, you can do that and kind of go around this, but for the time being, this is a pretty fail-safe way in order to do this. We'll go over to Exit, hit Save Changes and Exit, and then that should switch over and boot off of the DVD that we just popped in, rather than trying to boot off of our SSD. Press any key. After booting from the DVD, we're going to go into the Windows 8 setup environment. And first off, it's going to just ask you what language to install. We're just going to keep these at English, but feel free to change them if you're in a different location or you speak a different language. We're going to go ahead and install. Bear in mind, in the future, if you have issues with your computer, you can use this to boot up and go into a repair environment as well. So that's pretty convenient. But from here, it's just going to go through starting up some setup things, and it will prompt you to enter your product key right here in order to activate Windows. Now, we have our product key on hand. If you're installing Windows 8.1 and either your product key is not working at this point, or you need to purchase a product key later, go ahead and Google Windows 8.1 generic keys, and you can find keys that you can input here that will get you through the installation process. You will need to update them with a valid key once Windows is fully installed though. So just a moment here while I type this in. From there, we're presented with a license agreement. We're going to go ahead and read that really quickly, accept it, and click Next. And then we're presented with 2 options. We can upgrade, or we can do a custom installation. Upgrading is an option if you're upgrading from a previous existing installation of Windows. I'm going to show you guys the custom installation because I prefer a clean install anyway. Now, we only have a single drive that's currently connected. However, this drive already has some partitions on it. Now, depending on the drive you're installing to, you might see unallocated space. You might see some partitions there. Again, I'm assuming that you have double-checked your drive to make sure that there's no data on there that is important, that you need to keep, that everything is backed up. What I'm going to do here is use these tools to delete the existing partitions, which is generally a good way to do it, and that leaves all of the space on the drive as unallocated. From here, you can pretty much just hit Next. You can also create your own partition if you want to do something that's not using up all of the space on your drive. I just hit Next. That you will use all the available space on the drive, and it will go ahead and start copying Windows files. Now, depending on the speed of your optical drive, for example, this can take anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 minutes even, but it should proceed pretty quickly, and we'll go ahead and pick back up once we've moved on to the next step. After Windows has finished copying the installation files, the system will automatically restart, and then eventually you'll get back over to this personalized screen. So this is some last Windows setup options. So here you can just choose a color scheme. Since this is the money build and it's just so money, I'm going to go with green, and we'll call it Money PC. Sweet. So choose a name, hit Next, and you're also going to go ahead and choose some settings. I find that Express settings work just fine for that. And then lastly, a username for you to log in with, and I'll just go with Paul for now, because that's my name. All right. You can also enter a password there. I do recommend using a system password just for the sake of brevity. We're going to go ahead and bypass that. At this point, Windows 8 is going to do some final setup options, and then it will get into the actual operating system environment. It should happen fairly quickly here. And then from there, our next step would be to connect to the internet and go ahead and move on with the driver installation process. You can feel free to move on to the next point in this video if you're ready to move on with driver installation. I will point out one thing though, and that is that if you're using an optical drive like we have with the Money build here, you do have the option, if your network interface card for network connection is not recognized right off the bat by Windows 8.1, go ahead and grab the driver disk from your motherboard, pop that into your optical drive, and load just the network interface card driver from that. Let's just go ahead and see if ours is currently being recognized. Seems like we are okay. No connections are available because I haven't connected anything yet. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to installation on our AMD system, in which case we do not have an optical drive to work with. So we've swapped over to our AMD system, and as previously mentioned, this system does not have an optical drive, so we're going to go a different route. We're going to actually download an image of the installation disk on our computer. So this is the first thing you're going to need for this type of installation, is another computer to use. Hopefully you have another computer, or maybe you have a friend who can let you borrow one. We're just going to use this laptop. Apart from that, you will need a 4 GB USB flash drive. That's what this is, I promise. Bear in mind that, I should say 4 GB or larger, and also bear in mind everything on this flash drive is going to be erased when we create the installer, so make sure you have that backed up. Of course, you're also going to need your Windows 8.1 installation key. And then apart from that, you'll need all the stuff we already mentioned in the previous installation, such as a mouse, a keyboard, a monitor, and the internet, of course, as represented by that red cable. So with our secondary computer set up here and connected to the internet, I'm going to go to this website. The URL is a little bit long. It's on the windows.microsoft.com site. We'll put a link to this down in the video description, or if you just search for Windows 8.1 Create Installation Media, this will kind of walk you through it. Now what this is going to do is download a tiny little program that will go ahead and download the rest of it. So that's available via this link right here, Windows 8.1 Setup. So I'm going to click that, and it will download, and then we will run it. It's a very small program. It's only about 6 megabytes, so it should download pretty quickly. And I'm going to go ahead and run that from the desktop now. And we will get a prompt. Go ahead and click yes. And then this is going to initiate the Windows 8 setup. Now the very first thing it's going to do is ask you to enter that product key once again. So we'll go ahead and type that in. Again, sorry, we're not going to show you what our product key is, but we'll be back in just a moment. If your product key checks out, you can go ahead and click Next, and it will say just a little bit longer while it contacts the server. Now, there's going to be a couple different options here for how to go ahead and install. It's also going to warn you if you're connected to a metered data plan, you might want to go ahead and wait or order a disk directly, because this is going to be a reasonably sized download, so just bear that in mind. Go ahead and click Next, and it's going to initiate the download of Windows 8.1. Now while Windows 8.1 is downloading, if you have some spare bandwidth, you can also take the time to go ahead and pull up your motherboard manufacturer's website. So I've gone to the MSI website here. I'm going to choose the motherboard, our A88XM Gaming Micro ATX motherboard that we used in our AMD build. I'm going to go to the download section, and basically here there's a few different things that I'm going to eventually want to download, but all I really am interested in right now is going to be the LAN driver. So I'm going to go ahead and select my operating system, which is Windows 8.1 64-bit. And then here we have several different drivers that are indicated by the text on the right. I'm just going to go ahead and locate our killer network driver, and I'm going to download that at the same time that my Windows 8.1 download is also going on, which only has a couple minutes left, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do with that in just a second. On to the next step. As you can see, 8.1 setup has gotten to the point where we can choose install now, or install by creating media, or install later from your desktop. We want to install by creating media, second option here, so we'll choose that and go with next. And then we're presented with the options of a USB flash drive or an ISO file. Now if you want to keep an ISO file to hang on for later to create more USB flash drives, that's a fun thing to do. I actually have one of those set aside. But what I'm going to do now is take the USB flash drive and go ahead and plug it in, and make sure you flip it right side up. It's important. And then we're going to go ahead and proceed with the USB flash drive installation. Again, everything's going to be erased on that flash drive, so make sure that it is backed up. Go ahead and click Next. This is the removable drive. It's F. We can double check. There's our F drive right there. I know the data on here is okay to be written over, so we'll go ahead and click Next. And then it's going to prompt us once, warn us that it's going to delete everything on the drive. Now we'll go ahead with the creation of that USB flash drive. I'm going to do one more thing once this finishes, but again, this will just take a few minutes. You'll know that your USB flash drive is ready when you see the words on the screen that say your USB flash drive is ready. They will also reprint your key right there, so you can grab that. I mean, you should still have it on hand, but I've blocked it here just in case. There is one last thing I wanted to do before we put away our handy dandy other working computer, and that is I want to take that killer network driver that I already downloaded, and I'm just going to drag that over here and drop it in there. Now you should have some extra space on your flash drive depending on the size. This is just going to help us save a step later on, especially if once we install Windows 8.1 onto the system, we can't immediately connect to the internet. Some network interface cards are automatically going to be recognized by Windows 8.1. Others will not. It's just kind of hit or miss depending on the chip that you're using, but this will make sure that we can get connected. All right, that's copied over. We can go ahead and shut this down and we'll switch over to the AMD system. So I've got our AMD 7850K system set up here, and now we're going to move on to installing on that. So we've got our newly minted Windows 8.1 USB installation USB. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in and power on the system. I'm going to tap delete once again to get into the BIOS of our MSI A88XM motherboard. And in there I'm going to change a couple things one more time. So here you'll notice again, as compared to our ASRock motherboard, we have a different look and feel for the UEFI. However, all the functions are still going to be there. It's just they might be in different locations and they're not always going to be labeled exactly the same. Here I'm going to want to go into Settings. I'm going to want to go into Advanced, and then I'm going to want to go to Integrated Peripherals. Here is where I will be able to once again access our SATA mode for our serial ATA configuration. And here, since we've just got those two drives installed, all I'm really doing is double checking to make sure we're in AHCI mode. Again, here I have IDE, AHCI, and RAID, but since I'm not planning on setting up RAID in this particular system, we'll leave it at AHCI. Then the other thing we want to do again is tell it to boot from that USB drive instead of booting from going to the SSD. One other thing to mention, I have already gone in and unplugged the mechanical drive from the system. So once again, we are only going to have the actual SSD that we're installing to connected. So here I have actually a drag and drop boot device priority that MSI has done here. So I'm going to take the USB disk, move that to the front, and then I'm going to hit F10, which is almost always the save and exit function in a UEFI. So now at this point it'll restart the system, and it should look to that USB drive to go ahead and boot, and that should get us back into the Windows 8.1 installation environment. As you can see, we've moved into Windows 8.1 setup, and from here it's pretty much just going to be exactly the same as the installation we showed you on the Money system that was Intel based. So we'll show you a couple of these points, but again, it's pretty much the same situation. You're going to install your product key, and then it's going to go ahead and copy all those files. Once again, we'll accept the license terms, and once again, we're going to go with the custom installation because a clean install is just always the best way to go. Here we actually already have a partition on the drives. This is the 850 Pro 128 gig SSD. I'm going to delete that partition just to give us unallocated space, and that will let Windows 8 set up the partitions the way it wants to. So we'll hit Next, and again, copying Windows files, and from here it will be exactly the same as on the Money build Intel system. After all the files have been copied, Windows installation will actually prompt you now to go ahead and pull out the external drive that you have just loaded to. That's a nice little touch because if you didn't do that and you restarted, the system might go back and try to load off of that drive again and then just take you right back into the installation environment, which is not necessarily what you want. So I'm going to go ahead and restart, and I'm going to do one thing upon startup here again. So I'm going to be tapping delete to go back into the BIOS. Now the reason I'm doing this is to go ahead and switch back from booting from the USB over to our drive that we just loaded to. So good thing. Since I unplugged the USB, the MSI motherboard here actually automatically went back to boot from the UEFI hard disk. So that's cool. And in the chance that it doesn't do that, I recommend switching back to that just so it goes there immediately. Otherwise, when you plug in other USB devices in the future, it could potentially go and try to boot off of them, and it's just faster to boot straight off of your bootable drive. So the SSD we just installed too. So now, once again, just like the Money build, it's going to go through basic Windows setup, and we'll run through that really quick, and then we'll move on to driver installation. All right, folks, Windows 8.1 has installed successfully, as you can probably tell here. So next up is going to be the section I mentioned at the beginning of this video, which is driver installation. Now for this part, you're probably just going to need an internet connection, again represented by this red Ethernet cable. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that in the back. Of course, you're going to need all the other hardware that we've been working with so far in this video. And this is going to be the AMD system that we're going to continue working with for now, and we are going to switch over to the Intel system in just a few moments as well. Now when I have a new, fresh Windows installation, the first thing I'll usually do is just go ahead and plug in the internet. And if you watch the little icon in the lower right-hand corner of the screen, you will probably see the internet icon, and right now it's got a little X over it, which indicates there is no internet connection. The same thing will happen right now if we open to Internet Explorer. I'm not connected to a network. Fortunately, I just had an idea indicated by that sound that you might have just heard, and that is that we should install a driver for our network interface card. But fortunately, with the AMD system, if you guys remember, I pre-loaded a driver onto our USB stick. So I'm just going to go over to my computer, and I still have the USB stick plugged in. Actually, I plugged it back in. So I'm going to go in here, and I'll go over to the Killer Network driver, which I already downloaded and copied over here. And I'll just take that and copy it over to the desktop. The other thing I like to do on the desktop is make a new folder and just call it drivers. This will help me keep them stored, because I like to keep copies of old drivers. I don't know, just cause. And it also helps me to organize which ones I've already installed. So I'll take the killer one here. Sometimes I'll also rename this so I know what it is afterwards. I usually call it, hold on. I'll usually call the LAN driver LAN, just to indicate it's for the local area network. This is the network interface card driver. And we'll go ahead and click the setup, and we'll hit OK. This is going to go ahead and install the driver for our network card. Once that's installed, the operating system will now properly know how to talk to our network card, and from there we should be able to connect to the internet. In fact, as this proceeds, we're probably going to get a pop-up in just a moment that says, hey, you've just connected to an internet, and what sort of settings do you want to go ahead and use for that? We'll give this just a moment. All right, so as you can see, Windows 8.1 is indicated. We just detected a network connection thanks to our network interface card now working. Do you want to find PCs, devices connected to this network? If you're on a home network and you trust the other computers, then we can go ahead and say yes. That's what I'm going to do here. If you happen to be connected to a work network maybe, or if you're somewhere public, then don't click no on that one. We'll hit finish on here, and it does want a quick system restart. I'm going to go ahead and do that just to make sure everything's loaded up properly. Whenever you get prompted for a system restart, especially during the driver installation, I usually go ahead and do the restart right then, just to make sure that drivers installing on top of each other don't get too, it will negate the possibility of having a conflict. So now let's go over what components inside your new computer you actually need drivers for, because that's an important thing to think about. Let's start with what you don't need drivers for, actually. So you don't need a driver for the case. The case should just work. Power supply is the same thing. You shouldn't need anything for the power supply. Also, the CPU, the memory, and the storage, or your optical drive, all of those things should work just fine. Most of the things you need drivers for are actually on the motherboard. So the first thing you're going to need is a chipset driver. That's one of the things I usually install first. Apart from that, you might have other components on the motherboard that need drivers, such as the LAN or network driver, which we've just installed. USB is another thing that might need drivers, especially for USB 3.0 if you have add-on chips. You're going to need a driver for your audio, and you're going to need a driver for your video card, of course. Since we're on our AMD system here, we're going to go ahead and pop open Internet Explorer, and we're going to go to the MSI website, because that is where we will be able to find the support page for our motherboard. So go ahead and go over to support. If you're using another motherboard besides MSI, say Asus or ASRock or EVGA or that sort of thing, or Gigabyte, generally speaking, their motherboard manufacturer's page will have a support link. And from here, you can either search for your product or enter your product name. I happen to know that we have an A88X. A88XM Gaming is ours, so we'll go ahead and click that. Then from here, there's a few options. So we want downloads because we want to download drivers. And now we're on the A88XM Gaming page where we can download BIOS, drivers, utilities, manuals, and quick guides. You might want to consider a BIOS update. That's something that I'll often do when I'm first setting up a new system, depending on what BIOS you're using. We're not going to go over that in this video. And another way you might think about it is if your computer's working and there's no features that you are having issues with, then you can go ahead and leave the BIOS as is. We're going to jump over to driver. We will need to select our operating system, which is Windows 8.1 64-bit. It is important to know whether you're 64-bit or 32-bit. And if you're not 100% sure, then you can go to computer, and you should be able to find that out. Wait, I forgot how to do this. Here's something I always like to do with a new system. I like to have the computer on the desktop. Okay. There's more than one way to do this, but if you go to your computer and you click on Properties, you should be able to see what type of operating system you have. So 64-bit is what we installed, and that's what we're going with. So Windows 8.1 64-bit. So for drivers here, we have USB 3.0. We have a RAID driver, which we're probably not going to use since we're not doing RAID for this system. Onboard audio drivers for the onboard audio. There's the network driver that we already pre-installed, and of course the chipset driver. I always like to start with the chipset, so we'll go ahead and download this. We'll hit Save As, and we'll save everything over to the desktop, like so. And then since we can download everything at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and download the rest of these. Apart from these drivers, the last driver I might potentially download would be one for a discrete video card. This is not installed right now, but this is the MSI R7-270. And if we were, I'm sorry, 270X, but if I did have this installed, I'd go ahead and download the AMD Catalyst graphics cards drivers as well, straight from their website. Our downloads have finished, and there's actually something else you could do right now if you wanted to. It's something that you're going to do either way, and I'll be coming back to this at the end. But it's Windows Update, and Windows Update is something that you should always do whenever it's available. And whenever you do a new install of an operating system, Windows Update is something that you should run until there are no more updates available. So you can find that through the control panel. I'm using the desktop version here, but there's also Windows Update in the Metro UI. But let's go ahead and hit check for updates. This will automatically check, and then it will tell me if I have any updates that are available. So right now we have 46 that are available. A lot of these are security updates. But if you do a brand new system installation, oftentimes Windows Updates will actually have drivers available to download so that it can get Windows 8.1 playing nice with your hardware. You have the option of using those, but those tend to be a little bit more generic. I like to use the specific ones from the manufacturer's website instead. So I'm going to skip this for now, but I'm going to be coming back to this after I get these drivers installed in order to make sure that Windows is all up to date. I have all the security patches I need, and everything's good to go. So again, we're going to start off with the chipset. So it's a zip folder. I'm just going to drag that over to the desktop. Then I have my drivers folder that I made up here in the top left. And what I do with that is drivers that I've already installed, like the killer LAN, I just go ahead and drop into there. That's kind of how I keep track of what I've installed already. So once this has decompressed or uncompressed or expanded, or however you want to put that, we can go ahead and install the chipset driver. I do like one of these nice features of Windows 8.1 is they give you a little bit more detail when it comes to file transfers and unzipping stuff and that sort of thing. You can even pause it midway through, which is I always find to be kind of handy. All right, so here's our chipset driver. I've gone ahead and opened this up. You might notice that you can see the file extensions. This is something that's available in folder options. I just updated that because I like to see all the file name extensions so I can tell what's what. We'll go ahead and open this up. This is an AMD driver installation, so it does still have the Catalyst install manager, similar to the AMD graphics drivers. So go ahead and click Next. We want to install. Express is usually okay for these types of installations. You can try custom if you want to look more specifically at what's being installed and where it's being installed to. Although honestly, if you go custom for the AMD Catalyst install manager, that's really all you can choose is where to install it. Oh wait, no, I'm just kidding. You have this whole list right here. So you can choose what to install and what not to install. I'm just going to install everything. So we'll hit Next, hit Accept, and we'll let this run its course. And then chances are we'll also be prompted for another restart once this finishes. So next up I just have audio and USB 3.0, so I'm going to go ahead and install those in just the same fashion. by dragging the folder over to the desktop, expanding it, and then go ahead and running the setup or installation program. Again, restarts might be required, and then after that I will go and run Windows Update until there are no more updates left to run. But that's going to wrap it up, at least for this AMD section. We're actually going to jump back over to the Money build, and we'll take a look at doing the driver installation on an Intel system. Okay folks, we've switched back over to the Intel system, and here we have the same issue once again. Down on the lower right we have a little X on our LAN icon, and that means that the network interface card that's built into this motherboard was once again not recognized. Now I actually have a couple options here. So I could go with the other system. If I have another computer available, I can go to the ASRock website, download that driver, pop it onto a USB flash drive like that one, and go ahead and load it like I did on the AMD system. But I'm going to show you guys another method, which is what you should use if you don't have another computer, but you do need an optical drive. So I'm just going to use the ASRock driver disk, and I'm going to pop this in, and I'm only going to load the LAN driver off of this disk, simply because for all the other drivers I want to make sure I get the updated ones if they're available from the ASRock website. So the disk has now been read. We'll pop this open now. There's a setup utility that ASRock put in there that we could run, but I'm just going to open the folder. I'm going to manually look and find these files. Now, I didn't show you guys this earlier, but let me show you this real quick. You'll notice there's no file extensions here. This is an application. It's actually an executable file, but for some reason Windows likes to hide those. This is just one of those little pet peeves of mine, so I'm going to show you guys. If you go here to the Start menu, you type Folder Options, or Folder Op. We go into Folder Options. That's under the View tab here, and I like to display the full path. I like to show hidden files. I like to not hide empty drives. And this is the big one right here. Hide extensions for known file types. I don't know why that exists. I hate it. Okay. Hit apply, and now we can see, oh look, that's an executable, and that's an INI file. Okay, cool. Moving right along though, the drivers should be located in the drivers folder. The LAN drivers are what we need. That should be in the LAN folder. And we have Atheros and Intel. I'm pretty positive this is an Intel NIC in there, but if you're not sure, you can find that information in the manual. Aha! So if we go to the manual and look over here to the installed actual hardware that's in there, over in LAN we can see this is a Qualcomm Atheros Killer E2200 series. So we want the Atheros driver, not the Intel one. We'll go ahead and go in here, and once again we have an application executable. Run that. This should install the driver, and then we should once again be able to connect to the internet. And after a quick restart, we'll be back up and running. Alright, we have network once again. I'm going to go ahead and turn on file sharing again. Use your best judgment whether or not to do that. Again, more Qualcomm Atheros Killer Network Manager stuff. We're going to bypass that for now because we're not really focusing on that. But with an internet connected, once again we have access to things like Windows updates as well as downloading the appropriate drivers for our motherboard. So just to go over the drivers we're going to need, I've jumped over to the ASRock website. So just like we did with our MSI motherboard in the last one, let's go over to the download section. Let's input our model name, which is the Z97X Killer. And we have our model right there. So we've got the download page. That's where we're going to go. We'll click on that. And then we have all of our downloads right here. So we actually scroll down. You can again choose your operating system, Windows 8.1 64-bit, and then we have things like our audio driver. There's a few other drivers for Intel that you are going to want to pay attention to and make sure you have. The INF, that's going to be your chipset driver. You're also going to have the Intel Management Engine, which is another driver. You should install that one. There's a Rapid Start driver, which will help to aid in rapid start settings, and you'll notice right now that's Secure Boot, not Rapid Start. Never mind. Rapid Start can help your system start up a little bit faster. Smart Connect is another option that you can or cannot install depending on whether you need it. Again, there's the Atheros LAN. We could install the updated version of that if we wanted to, but it's working for now, so I'm going to pass that. But then the other thing that we want is Intel's Rapid Storage Technology driver. That will help to manage our storage configuration with our SSD as well as our two mechanical drives that we're going to be setting up in RAID eventually. Also, we got a VGA driver. That's for the Intel built-in iGPU and USB 3.0 once again. So again, I'm going to go through and download all of these using the USA download option. Usually I'll just go ahead and set them all to download at the same time, and then from there I'll take a quick break and come back to go ahead with the installation. So I'll just save all these to the desktop one more time, just like we did with the AMD system. Alright, so I've got the 5 main driver packages that I want for the motherboard all downloaded, so let's make another drivers folder. Move that up here, and we'll go ahead and decompress. Again, I like to start with the chipset, which is listed as INF right here. So we'll go ahead and unpack that one. That was quick. And we'll run the setup chipset file that's in here. And this will take us through the Intel chipset device software installation. We will click next, we'll accept, we'll install, we'll click yes, and then it will install. And this should go pretty quickly. Intel's chipset installations are fairly quick. And I've actually noticed at times it doesn't even prompt me for a restart, so just finish, and good, it's installed. Okay, so chipset's done. We'll go ahead and put that in the drivers folder. Next up, we'll move on to the management engine software, so we'll go ahead and decompress that. Again, have it nice and quick. Run the setup ME, and again, same procedure. Fortunately for most of these driver installations, there's no extra add-on software or anything like that. If you're downloading free software off the internet, sometimes it'll try to install a toolbar or something. That's why I always like to use the custom or advanced versions of the installation that will allow you to deselect that sort of thing. But here, management engine components have been installed. We're good to go. Again, no reset required, so I like that. Move that to the drivers folder and delete the zip folder. And we'll move on to rapid storage technology. Again, this is going to help us take best advantage of the chipset PCH, or peripheral controller hub, that controls all of our drives that are connected directly to the Z97 PCH. Again, we'll click next for all these options. The default folders are generally okay for these type of installs. And again, we'll go through an installation here. And we'll have to check. I feel like this one might prompt us for a restart. Yes. So we're going to need a restart here. But that's the 3 major motherboard drivers that we need to install. After we move on from here, we're just going to need to do the audio and the USB. All right, guys, so I jumped over the installation of the last couple drivers. That was the USB 3.0 and the Realtek Audio, but those are now both installed as well. And the last thing for this particular system that we would need to install drivers for is the graphics card. Now, I mentioned earlier that Windows Update will automatically run in the background to update your system, and it will sometimes prompt you for a restart, that sort of thing. But what Windows Update is going to do is it's going to download the latest drivers that it has available from the Windows Microsoft's repository of drivers. Now, the cool thing about that is certain companies that work directly with Microsoft are able to update their drivers directly on Microsoft, which means that sometimes the automatic drivers that Windows Update will install might be the latest drivers for what you need. So actually, after this last restart, I noticed the NVIDIA control panel had popped up. It's available here. It's also down in the system tray. It's running. And that means that Microsoft, through Windows Update, has automatically installed the latest NVIDIA driver. And we can see right here, it's version 340.52. Now, if this had installed, and I did this just a moment ago to double check, but what I would want to do is make sure, is that the latest version? Because it might not be, depending on how recently NVIDIA has launched something new. So I'm going to go over to the NVIDIA homepage, nvidia.com, and then I'm in the US, North America section, but we'll go over to drivers, we'll go to GeForce drivers, and here we can search for the driver we need, which is a GeForce. We're running a GeForce GTX 760. So I'll go ahead and choose that card. Again, I'm going to go to Windows 8.1 64-bit, just like all the other drivers we've downloaded. I'll hit Start Search, and this will tell me what the latest driver that's available. And we can see right here, latest driver is 340.52, which is the driver that's installed. So excellent. It saved a step, and that's up to date, and that's all good to go. So cool. We're going to leave that as is. But one question you might have after going through all this driver installation is to think to yourself, am I okay? Is everything all set? And a way you can check that is by going to your computer, right-click on My Computer. I always add my computer to the desktop, but if you don't have it there, click on this little folder icon, and then right-click your computer over here. Anyway, you're going to go to Manage, and again, there's more than one way to do this. This is just the typical way that I go about doing it. This will take you into Computer Management, and then you're going to want to click on the Device Manager section right over here. Device Manager will tell you all the devices that are connected. If there's something here that is not recognized or doesn't have the proper driver installed for it, this will expand the little subsection, and it will have a little bang, the little triangle with the exclamation point on it, the yellow triangle, and that's how you will know there's no driver installed for that or it's not working properly. Fortunately, with the steps we've taken here, everything is working and good to go, so we can go ahead and move on to some next steps. Speaking of next steps, Windows Update. As mentioned earlier in this video, Windows Update is very important. You will always want to run it to make sure you have the latest updates specifically for security. So I'm going to go back here into the control panel, and once again I'm going to check for updates. Now, since Windows Update is running in the background, it's already notifying me I've got 44 important updates to install. So all I would do at this point is basically run Windows Update, check for updates, install them where necessary, perform the restart or whatever else is necessary, and you can manually tell it to check for updates right there. After the restart goes through, I come back here, I check for updates again. Sometimes, depending on how old your installation is, for instance, if folks out there are installing Windows 7, which is still a viable operating system, you might have to run this 4, 5, 6, 7 times just to get your operating system up to date. It does take a bit of time, but it is well worth doing. You should do it and make sure everything is good to go there. But apart from Windows Update, we have a few other tasks, some more things that you might want to do on your system. One thing is antivirus software. And fortunately with Windows 8.1, you actually have Windows Defender that's already installed. Defender, right there. So Windows Defender automatically loads with Windows 8, and it will automatically update itself, and it will keep its virus definitions up to date and that sort of thing. You can, again, manually go in here to download the latest ones if necessary. If you have additional or other antivirus software that you want to install, now would be a great time to do that. I always like to get that installed first before you start browsing the internet or that sort of thing. So antivirus software is one thing. We'll let that go ahead and run in the background. Another thing you might want to do is perhaps install additional ways to browse the internet. So for instance, I'm a fan of having multiple browsers available to me, so I'm going to go ahead and download Firefox here. We'll go ahead and save that to the desktop. I also like saving stuff that I download to the desktop, not because I like to clutter up my desktop, but more so because once I've done whatever I'm going to do with them, I see it there, and then I go ahead and delete the installer file or that sort of thing. So we'll install Firefox here. And the reason I like to have multiple browsers available is because I have lots of different logins, for example. So I can be logged into my Gmail in one, and then on the other one I can be logged into my secondary Gmail account, and other things like that too. Also, different browsers have different features that you might want to access. And we can also import stuff for Firefox here. We'll import from Internet Explorer. Anyway, Chrome is also another great browser if you want to try that out. Sure, let's make Firefox a default browser. And beyond that, let's talk about some other things you might want to do. So we've talked about some antivirus software. Oops, close tabs. Antivirus software has now updated. That's good to know. Oh, I know what we wanted to do. Remember those additional drives, the mechanical drives that I unplugged? I'm going to plug those back in and show you guys how to set those up. I'll be right back. Since I'm going to plug those in, I could do it with the system on, but just to be safe, I'm going to shut down first, and I'll be right back. Alright guys, so I've just plugged those drives back in and restarted. I'm going to right click on my computer again and go to Manage one more time. This is the same place we went to look at Device Manager a few moments ago. Now we're going to go over to Disk Management. Now I've been talking about setting these drives up in a RAID configuration, and I'm not going to show you guys how to do that today. That's kind of a subject for another video. But even if the controller for these drives is set to RAID, I can still set up these drives individually as individually connected disks. Just because a hard drive or an SSD is connected to a controller that's set up for RAID mode doesn't mean it needs to be added to part of a RAID array. Okay, so whenever you have a brand new, completely unused drive, when you first load this up, Computer Management is going to scan and look for the drives, and it's going to pop up immediately and say, hey, these drives have not been initialized. These are completely brand new drives. So when you initialize a new disk for the first time, it's important to bear in mind how much capacity is on the drive. Since these drives are higher capacity, they're 3 terabytes, I believe, WD black drives. We want to initialize them with the proper partition table, and that's GPT, which is the GUID partition table. And this is the newer one, which has the capability of addressing drives that are larger than 2.2 terabytes in size. This is a newer thing that's just happened in the last few years as hard drives have gotten much bigger. Master boot record is the older one, and if you're using any drive that's 2 terabytes or less, I recommend just going with MBR because it has a little bit more backwards compatibility. But we want to be able to use all of the space on these drives, so we're going to use GPT. We'll click OK. By the way, if you bypass that screen accidentally or that sort of thing, you can just choose the drive here and right-click to initialize it. But you'll get a little red icon there that says it's not initialized too. OK, so now we have 2 drives. They've now been initialized with GPT, but they're still unallocated. You'll see this is our installation boot drive that we have right here, our SSD, and that's already been partitioned here. So these are some system partitions that Windows 8 does when it installs. And then this NTFS 476.42 gigabyte partition is where the actual operating system is stored, which is why when I open my computer, local disk C, right there, which has 476 gigs free, and that is actually this right there. You can see the parallel C drive, C drive. Okay, that's cool. But you'll notice that we can't see the other drives up here yet, and that's simply because they haven't been formatted. So all you want to do is right-click on them, go to New Simple Volume. This will take you through a little setup wizard. I usually just use the maximum amount of space, which will be the default, and that you do want to assign it a drive letter. There's some other options you can go to here, but I do also like to I like to label it what it actually is so I can tell what it is. So I'll do WD 3 terabyte A and WD 3 terabyte B. Also, a quick format, particularly for a brand new drive, is very much recommended. Mechanical drives, if you don't do a quick format, can take quite a while. If you're using an older drive, you might want to do that full format, particularly for a mechanical drive. Don't worry about it with SSDs though. Okay. So now that has been partitioned, we can see it's got the D : is the drive letter, and now it appears right here, WD 3 terabyte A. Now we can go in there and copy stuff to it or do whatever we want to do. I'll just do the same exact thing here with the second drive just to show you guys one more time. Go in through the wizard, and we'll label this one WD 3 terabyte B. Quick format, finish, and again in just a moment that should pop up. So any new drives you connect to your system, if you open up your computer and you notice they are not there, chances are it's because it's just too new and you need to actually set it up first. So now we can see both of those drives connected there. Now granted, I do want to eventually set these up in a RAID array. You do that in the pre-operating system environments, and again that's a subject for another video. If I did that, it would format these drives once again and I'd lose all the data on them. So just bear that in mind. Okay, but that's it for the setting up a storage drive. A couple more things I wanted to mention just before we wrap up this video. I know it's been long, but we'll go ahead and include lots of stuff. One is how to make things look a little bit prettier. For that, I like a site called Interface Lift. And I'm not being paid by Interface Lift or anything. They just have a lot of fantastic, awesome pictures for their free wallpaper downloads. Let's see if there's anything pretty. Pastoral Road, beautiful. They often have them also in very high resolution. So if you have a high-res monitor, it's pretty cool to be able to do. I'll go into Documents and create a Wallpapers folder. And if you create your own wallpapers folder and you save a bunch of them in there, you can actually set it up to switch between them. I want to do this quickly for you guys, so there we go. Let's just get a couple in there to show. Now to customize this, I'm going to right-click on the desktop and go down to Personalize. And then we have a desktop background option down there at the bottom, which is currently set to one of the Windows 8 defaults. There's a bunch of ones you can choose here, but I'm going to go ahead and go to Browse, and I'll go into the My Documents folder where I just saved, a wallpapers folder. We'll choose that, and we'll notice the 2 wallpapers I just chose pop up there. So this way you can kind of set your own set of wallpapers and choose them there. And then I like to let it cycle maybe once a day. You can even shuffle them depending on how you like it to cycle. Hit save, and then we have some nice pretty desktop backgrounds. Apart from that, a couple things we did aesthetically. You might have noticed earlier I put my PC on the desktop. That's something that I like to do. You can do that by right-clicking the desktop, going to Personalized. There's a Change Desktop Icons located up there in the upper left. And here we can add or remove the computer, recycle bin. We can even do shortcuts to Control Panel or that sort of thing. You can even change the icons for things if we want to get really fancy with it. But I do like all of the personalization options that Microsoft integrates here. And then one last thing, after you've got everything set up, good to go, you've got your operating system installed, you've got your drivers updated, you've got Windows updates updated, you're running antivirus software that is also up to date, everything's secure, you can go about your computing tasks that you typically use a computer for, or maybe you can just open up your system and do more work with the hardware. That's what I like to do. Never stop upgrading. So in particular, for those of you folks at home who maybe are setting up a system to use for now that has an integrated GPU, say an Intel iGPU or an AMD APU, then adding on a discrete graphics card like this MSI R7 270X is a fantastic way to upgrade and a fantastic way to convince yourself that you need to work more with the hardware. But that's just my personal recommendation. You can just use your computer if that's what you want to do. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Thank you so much for sticking with us through the entire thing. If you enjoyed it, if you learned something new, or if this helped you out at all, go ahead and leave us some feedback down in the comments section below. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if you have any tips or suggestions for us to include in the next version of this video that we do, or just video tips in general, because apart from getting everything set up initially, there's lots more you can do with your computer. So we're looking for ideas for additional video content that you guys want to see. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button while you're down there. We'll see you all next time on Newegg TV.